ngayon, isa sa aking mga favorite Ilocanos out there, Dr. Walden Bello. Thank you very much, Walden, for joining us again.
Oh, thanks, Richard, for inviting me again.
As always, Walden, actually kanina no, I wrap up na ng aking yearly, alam mo naman, sa Spotify, podcast and all. And apparently, our episode on Thailand and lessons for the Philippines was the second highest episode ko, no podcast. You were only beaten by the Maharlika episode we had with our good friend Budget Babe. So, not a bad performance. Perhaps for 2024, we'll target for number one most listened to podcast episode. So thank you so much again,
Sure.
Walden, for joining us. So Walden, obviously we want to talk about your case among others shortly, but also talk about your, your take on what's happening in the country. As I have my own thoughts on that, and we exchange thoughts with our common friends, among others, Ronald Liamas, who owes me a lot, and Christian Esguerra as his talent managers. We got the guy famous now, so suddenly everyone is looking for him as an analysis. So let's see. Kasi sumisingil na si Ronald. Sabi, wait lang. I didn't charge you for my talent management pa at publicity campaign na me and Christian Esguerra did for you. Now, well then,
Uh,
things are looking interesting to put it in a, I don't know, in a quite a dialectical way, but if not in a more political sense of the word. Now, so Delima is out, and it looks like, I mean, we had an interview last week. It looks like she's very confident that the last legal threads, no, are going to be untethered pretty soon, and she will be most likely on the offensive na, no? How do you feel about the Delima situation, considering you guys have a very good friendship throughout the years? I know you have been source of a lot of books and advice, and she has written a lot of letters to you, handwritten letters. I remember back in the day, because she was writing all of us, but you were among her favorite interlocutors. Can you tell us a little bit about that, your friendship with Senator De Lima?
oh, well, I had worked with Senator De Lima on when I was the head of the House Committee on Overseas Workers, and we were trying to um, get to penalize a number of Philippine Dole officials abroad that were involved with what is
Right.
called the transport flight scandal, basically taking advantage sexually of our OFWs. And I worked very closely, and she was very, very committed. So I was not that particularly close, but when Duterte started to slap this crazy,
Yeah.
that she was a part of the whole drug ring, I knew immediately that
Yeah.
this was a frame up, because I
Hit
had
job.
worked with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had worked with her, so there was there it to me it was just a frame up, and it was silly, and so that's why from the very beginning, I was really quite supportive of her, and I wrote articles both nationally and internationally in support of her,
Right.
and just calling it a spade, which was Duterte a frame up. And and at the same time, I analyzed what happened, and I think there were two things that I think occurred here. One was the Duterte strategy, its evil genius of raking up, misogynistic attacks on her, which was, of course, carried out in the House by people like Roque, and it was appealing to this misogynistic kind of subliminal things in Filipinos,
Right.
and that was one thing. The second thing was just how completely blitzkrieg talaga eh. And I mean, charging the Secretary of Justice as being the center of the drug ring in the Philippines. I think that even if some people initially thought it was crazy, just the mere effrontery of this sort of destabilized them, and sort of gave doubts that, oh my God, is there credibility to this? So na destabilize yung mga tao na who had not worked with Delima. And then thirdly, and I think the senator has pointed it out, that she was so disappointed that many of her political friends did not come to
Right.
her rescue, and I think part of it was that they feared that they would be next if they sided with her. So so I think that's sort of the way that I analyze the whole situation. So
Yeah.
but I was very happy to work with Senator De Lima, and as you know, she was deprived of a phone, and she had very limited TV viewing hours. So since I basically tried to get as many books as possible to her. I believe I
Right.
must have gotten some 800 to 1,000 titles into Camp Krame. And I
That's a
think
big
she,
operation. That's a big operation. It's like
yeah, well,
1,000 this.
she
You can
wanted
fill
to
the
be
whole barracks with 1,000 books.
she wanted to be an expert not only on the law, but on economics, on political science. She wanted novels. So, from fiction to
Yeah.
Thomas Piketty to uh, Arundhati Roy.
Right.
Well, that was, I realized that this was the stuff that would keep her mind going and
Yeah.
prevent her from going into gloom or or depression. So that's it. That was, and I was very very happy, and I was in the court when she got freed. And so I was very happy. It was a
Right.
joy for the nation that we finally stopped the Duterte machine that had framed her.
I mean, Walden, the reason I ask about this is because I know you're a man of very high threshold. You don't easily get impressed, especially by politicians and statesmen like, in besieged democracies like the Philippines. So, I always wondered like, where is this admiration for Leila de Lima coming from? I mean, I mean, if it's from usual folks, liberal party folks, or folks from the Aquino administration, I understand it. But the more I talk to people, including Ronald Llamas, who was in the Aquino administration, political advisor, I hear so many good things about her. I talk to people who have been active in civil society and human rights campaigns, and they told me now when she was the head of the Commission on Human Rights, when she was the Justice Secretary, she really held the ground, right? She
Yeah,
really held the line, and she really fought for it. So she's a consistently authentic person committed to it. Kaya I wanted to ask where is your story coming from? Because I mean, Walden, I mean, we interviewed Senator De Lima the other week, and we can talk about that a little bit more later on. The thing is, there's so much the rumor meal, the dark Marites meal against her has been grinding through and through, and until even today, and some are saying na, oh, baka she's just getting scot free because etong administration naman ayo kay Digong, which we're gonna talk about later on. So, that's the problem, no? The kind of the Nazi kind of problem, which is when you spread lies over and over again for 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times in this case, it leaves a certain damage, and for me, you are among people that I consider as a moral compass. So, ako, parati ko sinasabi, if Walden has a respect for that person, there must be something special with that person. And by the way, this is completely independent from my own track of engagement with Leila de Lima. But the thing is, Walden, of course, sino ba naman ako? I'm just whatever journalist, academic out there. So, I asked you, I asked Ronald, I asked other people to also know her better, way better than me. Although, of course, all of us visited her throughout the years, and ako, I have high regards for her. So thank you for telling us your side of the story, another testimony to why Senator De Lima is really something special. I remember back in the day, De Lima, I mean, the first time that she really caught my attention and I realized there's something special about this person is, remember yung naka-issue siya with one big church, and then I think this was
yeah,
2015, right? And then ETSA was being blocked or something like that, and a former president actually did not drop by her birthday not long after that incident. So like, noon pa lang makikita mo na she was really walking ahead of the crowd, if I can put it that way, right? I mean, she's really an independent-minded person. And doon mo nakita matapang talaga tong taong to eh. And I
yeah.
just met her weeks before all the hit job black ops against her started in the Philippine Senate. There was an awarding ceremony. I was there. And she was still jolly and sprightly and go lang siya and go. And later on, I also visited her in 2019 onwards, when she was incarcerated. But my point is, I had my own take on this. But to hear it from people like you na alam ko, hindi ka madali ma-bullshit, sorry to say it, na mataas ang threshold mo for respect, that is very encouraging. Now, Walden, let's go to the next part of the discussion here. Now, you and Layla Delima are in the same league on a whole range of issues, including the fact that both of you are awardees for your contributions to human rights by Amnesty International, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think she was the inaugural one, and you're like the first one who's more of like an economic justice kind of human rights advocate that has been celebrated. Were you, how should I put it? Like, did you see that? Like you and Delima will be more or less in the same camp, considering that like she worked in a liberal administration that you bashed a lot. You had fights with Aquino, back and forth. Napigon sa'yo si Aquino. Hanggang ngayon, daming pigon sa'yo ng mga liberals. Nagalit din sa akin ngayon. And they're saying, oh, it makes sense. Of course, Richard Walden, mga yan eh. Mga pasoy
Yeah.
yan. So, can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that? Like, you and Layla are kind of considering the same kind of circles and camps nowadays in terms of your advocacy, yung passion nyo, and your independence of thought and conviction.
Yeah, well, I mean, um, well, you're right. I became critical of the Liberal Party, especially when it was playing double standards. It was going after enemies, while at the same time being very tolerant of its people, despite the fact that they were engaging in corruption, and especially when we had uh, that
DAP?
that special fund.
DAP? Disbursement Acceleration Program?
Yeah,
Is that your issue?
yeah,
Or, oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the disbursement acceleration program, and so um, that was there. I mean, if you're part of a coalition with an administration, and the main platform that you have is anti-corruption, and you allow your people to be corrupt, hindi pwede yan. So I even got into, unfortunately, I got into difficulties with my own party, Akbayan, because I was intent really on calling the president on his double standards. And that's the reason that I finally resigned, because I could no longer, from the House of Representatives, because I could no longer um, tolerate the double standards of President Aquino. But when
Mama
it came,
Sapana, no? Walden, sorry. But I think the last straw was really Mama Sapana, right? I think that's really
yeah, yeah,
where, yeah,
that was there. Well, there were several things. One, the most important thing was the disbursement acceleration program, and the double standards there. The second thing was the EDCA, the the enhanced cooperation, military cooperation with the United States, which I opposed, and I became very public about that in an interview with Karen Davila. I think the president really, really got pissed off, called me more opposition than the opposition,
Oh wow, I
and then
didn't know that. Really, sa Edka?
yeah,
Oh,
he
he was
called
that
me.
pissed off with you, Pinoy?
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, Mama Sapano, I basically said, this is command responsibility. Hey, mag-John F. Kennedy ka naman. Accept command responsibility. Takot. No? Because, for some reason, he probably was advised by his lawyers that if you admit responsibility here, that will mean legal
Exposure.
case,
Yeah.
against legal. No, but a leader should really accept responsibility. Sasabihin mo yung commander on the ground of an operation that you authorized, that it's really the commander on the ground that made the big error. You can't do that. In any event, let me just say, Richard, that the exception to me was Laila Delima. Why? Because, let me go back again.
Yeah.
I worked with her
Right.
on trying to bring to justice Department of Labor employees that were preying sexually on our OFWs, which very well at that point in time you were working with me, and
Yeah.
we were trying to bring justice. And
I remember that. Yeah.
Laila de Lima attended our meetings. She was very supportive. She
Yeah.
wanted to
Genuine
bring
talaga siya.
justice
Yeah.
to our OFW. So my personal experience talaga ako na hindi lang yung she was tough when it came to human rights violations, investigating Duterte, but you could see that she really had a lot of sympathy and for to accomplish justice for our ordinary Filipinos abroad who
Right.
were being screwed up by their own government officials. So a personal experience like that
Yeah.
really generates a lot of respect. Kaya, as I said, Richard, nung inumpisa nila Duterte and Roque and Dick Gordon and all those crazy people, when they started accusing Delima and of this,
Oo nga, Dick
um,
Gordon, no? Yeah,
yeah, he helped.
Oo
Dick
nga,
Gordon.
no? Yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, kasi later sa Farmali, nakiki-opposition na sila later on, di ba?
Yeah, yeah.
I
No, no,
remember
but
Harry Roque a lot, yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, Dick Gordon
Oh,
helped in the ouster
shoot,
of
yeah.
Laila de Lima from the House Committee on Justice. He played the
Senate, yeah, yeah, Senate Committee on Justice,
yeah,
yeah,
in
yeah.
the Senate. He played the central role. But there
Yes,
was
yes, yes, he was the chair. Yeah, 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 I remember, yeah, yeah.
there was that whole conspiracy, and you cannot stomach a deliberate frame up like that. And so I do hope that Laila will get justice, not only on the Dutertes, but also on all the people who assisted in framing her up. And I would put Roque is one of
Harry Roque,
those.
I mean. Harry, Harry.
Yes,
There are many
Bitolian.
Roque there, but the most infamous is Harry.
Yeah, and then of course people like Richard Gordon. And you remember.
Kinabahan ko biglang Richard. Sabi mo like, wait, what?
No, no, yeah,
Richard,
right.
yeah, Dick Gordon. No, he's Dick
Dick
Gordon.
Gordon.
Sorry,
Yeah,
don't use Richard Walden.
yeah, yeah.
Use
I
the
mean,
Dick Gordon.
he's my classmate, and that sort of thing. But you
Yeah, yeah,
cannot
mali talaga yun.
participate in a frame up and not be called on it. So I hope that now that the wheels of justice are moving, forward instead of backward, I do hope that these people get prosecuted for the role they played in the biggest frame up in Philippine legal history. Talaga frame up talaga.
Right.
I mean, and you just don't take 7 years of somebody's life and and expect forgiveness. No,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, just in the interest of fairness, our other guests had different take on the disbursement acceleration program. Some were saying this was a way to facilitate making sure na hindi lang, wasted yung mga underspending and all of that. But on the issue of the Mama Sapano, we also had our, as guests Mayor Magalong, right, who was really really strong in terms of his criticism of how the Aquino administration handled that. So probably I think on the Mama Sapano one, I think we share more in common. But I get your point in terms of hypocrisies of liberals, not only in the Philippines but all around the world. We're also seeing that now in light of what's happening, the latest conflicts. No, now Walden, going back to this, I interviewed when I interviewed Leila last week. I asked her about your case in particular and the issue of because now we're talking about the wheels of justice somehow moving in the right direction, no, clockwise rather than counterclockwise, and there was some sort of connection problems. I don't know if it was on her side, on our minds, my side, but parang may problema talaga sa connection niya because even the Christian Esguerra interview, I think she also had some. But what she was clear about is she is categorically for decriminalization of libel, cyber libel, all sorts of libel and all. And obviously, this was in light of your case. How do you feel about your case without betraying, your legal strategy, and all? Can you just tell us a little bit about your perspective on your own legal predicament right now, and what are your hopes in terms of the near future? So in terms of prospect of you also getting justice. in ways that Layla is getting also right now. Yeah.
Well, I think Laila is a good example here because
Mm.
she could have been freed as in the previous program that you had. She could have been freed um, a year ago if she only
Yeah.
agreed to house arrest. You know,
Yeah.
but that would have meant, in her view, an admission of guilt. No,
Mm.
and she wanted things to be really clear, so she didn't. I mean, of course, nobody wants to be in jail, but she was willing she was willing to remain in jail
Yeah.
until she got bail. And of course, when you get bail, you don't, it's not an admission of guilt. It's something
Yeah.
that every citizen has the right to.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
she was firm on that. No
Exactly.
admission of guilt. As for me, no, there's no admission of guilt. I mean, I think the vice president's case of cyber libel against me is pure harassment in the midst of a political
Well, then, but why
campaign.
do you say it's the vice president? I think you're pertaining to a staff member of hers, right? Which we
No,
thought resigned and then
what,
now is in a senior position again, right? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that?
well,
Why do you say it's Sarah?
my sense is that it's the vice president's camp. That has always been my formulation. But it's the vice president's camp. I mean, how can you divorce the the press officer while she was mayor, and now her key press officer as in the vice presidential office, and in the education? How can you divorce that from her, the vice president herself? So I cannot see this person who filed the case against me, who's a very close aide, not having done it without the blessings of
Mm.
the vice president. And remember, Richard, this was in the midst of the campaign, and I was just trying to bring to the
Attention,
voters,
yeah, yeah, attention of
yeah,
people,
her,
yeah.
her actual record as vice mayor. And, so what was the counterattack? The counterattack was file a cyber libel case against me. The Davao City Council declared me persona non grata. The party of the vice president labeled me a narco politician. So,
Yeah,
one,
that's
two, three na
crazy.
barrage yan, just for saying that this is the record of Vice President of Mayor Duterte, and she needs to come out in a national debate to be able to clear up things. I mean, that's the reason we have debates during the vice presidential and presidential thing. But that's why if you're going to say participate in a debate, then you have part of part of appealing to the voters is telling the voters that I am the one who deserves to be the vice president because my opponent's record is quite bad. I mean, that's the gist of a debate. But if the person doesn't want to show up because she cannot defend her record,
Yeah.
then that was the whole essence of the thing. Was instead of showing up in a debate, they had a cyber libel case against me, declared me persona non grata, called me a narco politician. It was really, hindi fair yan. Hindi fair yan. Um, so back to your point, I cannot conceive of this press officer working closely with the vice president going after me without the blessings of the vice president.
Thank you, Walden, also for adjusting kasi medyo mababa ka masyado. Can you adjust your screen? Because
Yeah, yeah, sure.
yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, because I was a bit concerned about that. Make sure we want to see you while you're making the
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
impassioned intervention because I think well, I know you, Walden. You're how should I put it? Minsan, sutil ka rin. Like, like me. Like, sometimes sutil ka rin. And my sense is baka that was your way, you referring to a certain report about showing the paucity of the claim na drug-free ang ganitong. I think, was that also about, hinahamon mo siya na magdebate sa'yo na akala
Yeah,
nyo
of
ang ganda
course.
na... Yeah, my sense is parang it was in that spirit na you said that. And you were mentioning what was already out there. It's not like you made a comment out of thin air. But anyway, we'll leave that to the courts and hopefully the proper court to settle that soon. But I just wanted to
and
get
and
your sense
and,
on
and
this.
I'm
Yeah.
and I'm you know what, I will tell you, Richard, that I, having seen that court in Davao, I have great trust in the integrity of the judge, that we have. And
Right.
as I said, following Delima's example, we will see this through in court. We will, if I am going to get out of this situation that I'm in now, it will be because I have proven myself innocent by the standards of our courts. And I think that in this case, I'm very hopeful that our justice system, will work.
Well then, before we transition to the bigger picture and me picking on your mind as an analyst and also political sociologist, um, obviously your understanding is that this is not just about your case, right? And I think that was also the discussion I had with Delima,
Sure.
which is it's not also about her. It's about a bigger fight, right? And in this case, to be specific about the bigger fight, is also about decriminalization of libel. Is that a matter of principle and conviction? I mean, the concern I have, Walden, is I am also definitely against anything that allows for weaponization, no, whether it's counterterrorism law or libel laws that can easily be weaponized against people, no, and unfortunately we see that in fledgling, if not even in established democracies, sometimes to silence discord, to silence oppositional views, among others. At the same time, I mean, well, then there must be some exceptional cases, right, whereby you have quote unquote bayaran people who are really engaged. And think of the people, for instance, that smeared Leila Delima, right? I mean, some of them engage in horrible libelous attacks on her, which endangered her life, and unfortunately, their case was not isolated. Don't you envision certain exceptional cases whereby there should be a criminal case if someone is deliberately, endangering another person's life, not only reputation, by engaging in black operation smear campaign? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm absolutely for decriminalization. It should be a civil case, among others. But I believe there's certain circumstances, just like how hate speech is a violation of basic freedom. Don't you think there should be some exceptional cases like the horrible libelous attacks on Delima back in the day? That for me, parang civil suit is not enough. Someone has to be criminally held accountable. Do you get where I'm coming from, Walden? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, and here you need to weigh certain things, Richard.
Right.
The problem right now is that we've had over the last 12 years, the cyber libel law. And during that time, I believe there has been nearly 4,000 cases filed by politicians
Right.
against journalists like you,
Yeah.
against ordinary people, for just trying to tell the truth. No? So if we're talking about 4,000 cases being filed against people who are trying to dig up the truth, I mean, this is terrible situation of
Mm.
weaponizing, the law, and it's almost like, as I was telling some people, not only, if they can get a conviction, fine, but you know what, they want to impoverish people, because of the fact that a regular journalist, for
Yeah.
instance,
Right. Right.
you will have to hire lawyers and everything else. And before you
Yeah.
know it, siguro malakas yung moral courage ng tao, pero pagdating na sa, oh my God, I'm being pushed to poverty, that person is going to think
Yeah.
twice or thrice about this, no? So
So
yung,
the immiseration, it could be an immiseration. So
yeah,
I mean, we saw
yeah,
that in Singapore, right? Like
yeah,
the late Lee
yeah.
Kuan Yew would use that against his opponents, take them to the court and drag them to the court until they're reduced to nothing, right? Literally,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. I think this is, and that's just as good from their point of view as securing a conviction. you know. And then for some politicians, it's an alternative to killing their critics on the ground, because of course, alam naman natin na meron yan mga, people who hire a
Guns,
gun,
yeah. Yeah.
etc. But that's risky because you could really get caught in that. So
Yeah.
cyber libel, interestingly enough, has become a substitute for political assassination. That's safer, pa. So it's all this. This is what is there.
Right.
So you have to balance it, and I think that the option of just making it a civil case, of really being able to collect damages for somebody' reputation being harmed, I think is the best solution around. And to decriminalize it and just make libel a civil case. So that would be my position at this point in time. Sumosobra na talaga yung politiko na gumagamit nito kasi natatakot talaga sila sa criticism.
Okay, so ang argument niyo dito, Professor Bello, is that as you have to look at how the law has operated
Yes.
in
Yes.
in status quo, hindi in terms of in theory,
Yeah.
right? Na sa sobrang binaboy sa yung palagay,
Yeah.
binaboy talaga tong batas na to.
Mhm.
I think better we just take out the criminalization and just leave it as a civil suit. So
Yeah.
in that case, you're still against, accountability. You're still for accountability for people who are abusing
Yes,
their
of
freedom of
course.
expression. But you're just
Of
saying
course.
the track record is just so bad in terms of weaponization na medyo better rethink the whole thing altogether. Okay, now I see where you're coming from. Because yun nga, it's kasi for me, may mga tao na binaboy nila yung freedom of expression nila to black ops other people and besmirch other people, etc. And they deserve accountability for that. I'm
Yeah.
not an absolutist, freedom of speech absolutist, because if you're gonna use that to incite hatred and violence and all sorts of phobia, you have to be held accountable for that, right? And we saw big victims like Senator Delima, who was really a huge victim of this kind of black ops operation. Now, Walden, let's put on your hat as the political sociologist. Now, obviously, all of this thing we're discussing right now is not operating is not within vacuum. It's happening within bigger picture kung saan. Yes, let's call it what it is. Implosion of the Uniteam. I think you and I independently years earlier we said hindi sustainable itong Marcos and Duterte dynasty. You cannot put a lion and tiger in the same cage and expect them to be friends and allies and share the chicken and hyenas. It's not gonna happen, right? It's not gonna happen. So sorry for the zoo. I remember this yung dating chief of staff, yung first chief of staff, Pribos ba yan? Chief of staff ni Trump. He said the Trump administration is like a zoo without fence. It's like when you put when you put all these predators next to each other without fence, there's gonna be blood, right? So
Yeah.
that always stuck with me. So my point is, I don't think this is gonna end very well. I mean, when you put these two giants, and as I put it, I mean, both of us are Ilocanos, right? And for me, the Marcoses were always the OG, right? They were the originals, right? Like, if these guys gonna come back, they're not gonna share it with Duterte. They're gonna go for gold, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think zero surprise with what's happening right now. I mean, we have written on this already in the past, but nevertheless, what is your read of how things are turning out? Kasi ang basa ko rin dito, Walden, is yung isang side na mas mahina ngayon na ilusyonado pa rin, they're digging their own grave. Eh. Like every time BBM is giving them a chance to retreat peacefully, susulsul na naman sila, di ba? Like, Digong will go to China, Digong will attack Romualdez, Congress, SMNI will attack. Like, you guys are not realizing you're not in power anymore. And this is Marcos. They have their own mind, right? I don't know about Aimee, but I'm talking about Marcos, Romualdez, that whole gang. What is your read on that, Manong Walden? On our Ilocano friends
Well,
there, yeah.
alam first of all, tama ka, Richard, na as we said, this is going to happen sooner rather than later. And I would say that in terms of my quote unquote prediction, it's just about the right time for the split to happen. And so Kasi walang kwan eh. It's purely power. I mean, it's not principles involved. Uniteam was always about a question of power, power sharing or what. And,
Alliance of
nothing.
inconvenience. Alliance of
Yeah,
inconvenience. Yes.
yeah. Is it alliance of inconvenience or what? But there were no principles involved at all. So, and that's the most fragile kind of alliance. Pag you have nothing to stand on but an agreement to quote unquote share power. The second thing I think is, the Philippine presidency is something like this. And I think you probably agree with this. The Philippine presidency is one of the most powerful in the world.
Right.
For 6 years, you're a king. You can do anything. You can do anything. You can, and we saw how Duterte did this with Delima. I mean, he could buy Congress, he could intimidate the Supreme Court, he could do anything. So it's like a democratic monarchy. But after those 6 years, you when you leave power, then you're very, very vulnerable. This is why I think Duterte was pissed off at Sara for not running for president because I think Duterte already knew what was going to happen, that he was going to be left without protection. Uh, and Marcos, whom he had criticized and implied was a cocaine addict and he had no respect for, was going to be
Whoa.
president. No? So, yung tingin ko riyan is
Whoa.
nakita na ni Duterte ito. Kaya, hindi ba pinipilit niya si Sara tumakbo?
Pero
No?
yun nga, Walden, galit din si Sara sa tatay niya kasi pinipilit si Bongo. So, si Bongo
Yeah.
yata yung nagsira ng plano ng mag-ama na yan.
Yeah, yeah, yan na nga
Ang gulo nila, di ba?
ang problema kasi si Duterte Machiavellian mind yan,
Yeah,
no?
exactly.
Alam niya na hari ka for 6 years pero pag wala na dapat may protection ka. At pag wala kang protection kasi yung anak mo naloko ng mga Marcos,
Mga
kung na
OG.
yan. I mean, he probably expected that this blow up would occur. So now we're in this situation. As you said, the political winds have shifted, and do they know it? Well, probably they're still thinking that they have enough people within the bureaucracy and within the House. But I agree with you, na pag nakita na ng mga ibang institutions like Congress, mga congressmen, congresswomen, the justices, they've seen
military. I don't think
military,
they're not with them. Yeah.
that you become vulnerable. Influence and power can disappear in 30 seconds. And I think that's what's happening right now. So I don't know what, I mean, the possibility of actually Duterte going to The Hague and to the cell that's waiting for him there is actually more of a big possibility now. I mean, hindi biro yung ginawa nung dalawang committee sa Congress, yung Justice at saka yung Human Rights Committee, na to get the Philippines to cooperate with the ICC. I mean, that's a big step forward.
Right.
And I, so if I were Duterte, I would be very worried at this point. So now that Laila is free, the person who has the most data on him, both as president and as mayor of Davao, the posse is coming in. Now, of course, what the Marcoses will actually do, if they will go and allow his being prosecuted by the ICC. We still don't know at this point. Or will they, in typical elite fashion, give him an out and maybe scare him a bit, but
Leverage it, whip, use it as a
leverage it.
whip. Yeah,
Yeah, leverage it, but not really turn him over to the ICC. Yan yung mga calculations nila
yeah,
ngayon on the Marcoses side. But one thing I'm very sure, if in fact the the administration changes its position and now says that the ICC can come in and investigate, it's going to be out of political interest and not out of principle. No, of course, they might try to cloak it as the Philippines, becoming, the rule of law and all of that. But it's going to be a calculation based on what's good for dynastic interest at this point in time. And unfortunately, Richard, as you know, the country is caught up in this dynastic dramas, while while the rest, what we should really be doing, as in terms of governance, is just swept aside
yeah,
because everything gets focused now on power struggles. No? So the economy goes to pot, and so many other things get derailed because the big drama is that the elite politicians and the dynasties are all, thinking about their next moves. No, so that's for me the big tragedy,
yeah.
in the sense that, again, dynastic elite politics, uh, pure power plays, become dominant. Whereas what really needs to be done with the economy and so many other things,
Right.
really is put aside. So that's, for me, what that's the most tragic thing about what's happening right now.
Except if Walden, I want to end this podcast. I mean, we look forward to even more discussion, hopefully in person soon. At the same time, there is an opening here, right? New spaces are coming out. Because my next question, and I want us to end the podcast on this part for
Mm.
today is, but this family feud, interdynastic feud, right, is creating a space for a third force, right, for progressive and opposition to come in, because there's now an opportunity, right? Because if the current dynamics continue, BBM will also be. I mean, both Duterte's and Marcos's are somehow in a vulnerable position right now, diba? And in fact, my take is, ironically, because the opposition was weak after elections, BBM felt confident enough to take on Duterte's. But eventually, the opposition should come in, right? Whatever your definition of opposition. Do you see some potential green shoots? I mean, is there a chance now for Risa and Delima and you, among others, to lead the next generation of political opposition, and of course the younger generation, given Nayan? Do you see? I mean, what is your advice? I mean, what is your counsel? What should the opposition? How should the opposition approach this implosion and kind of the clash of titans situation that is happening in Philippine politics, to make sure hindi hanggang family feud drama lang, hindi lang hanggang mga one dynasty, lesser evil kind of dynamics, but actually we go for a true alternative.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think uh, the opposition should really mature as an opposition.
Yeah.
They have to leave behind the old yellow kind of politics that was just very hypocritical, and the people saw through it, and begin to really offer a vision of the country's future that's based on real democracy, the achievement of equality, and the regaining of our sovereignty as a country, both economically and politically. So here is a chance, and there are people that that are there, as you mentioned, Senator Delima and Risa Hontiveros, that whom both of whom I have a
Right.
great deal of respect for.
Right.
But in terms of the old guard of the Liberal Party, I don't think that they offer a future. They might just it would be better if they just disappeared and have real progressives articulate a vision for people. So so that's what I'm really hoping for, and I hope that the left, um, and as we all know, the left in the Philippines is has so many different groupings at this point in time. I hope that it gets to its senses and realizes that they just can't be fighting one another
Right.
instead of fighting to have a better future.
Right.
Because the left is just bogged down in terrible sectarianism at this point in time. And the problem is that unless that opposition comes in at this point in time, the force that is, and in fact, is moving very fast, is the United States. I mean, what else? What has been the main thing that has happened over the last year and a half? It's not domestic issues. It's been the granting of military bases to the United States. Four more bases to the nine, and you know, we've basically contracted out our defense and foreign policies to the United States. I mean, they're having it so good at this point in time. And how do we have a foreign policy that's really independent? And I wrote for the New York Times and others that said we really have to have an independent foreign policy. We need to criticize China for what it's doing in the West Philippine Sea, but at the same time, we cannot allow ourselves to be utilized by a superpower that's on the decline as a mechanism to to counter China. And my sense always, Richard, you might disagree with this, is that the bases here have had nothing to do really with Taiwan. I know that's what they say, that because of the Taiwan emergency. First of all, China is not going to be foolish enough to invade Taiwan. Secondly, it was about fortifying the Philippines, as a point of power projection against China, which has always been the strategic conception of the Americans regarding what the Philippines' main role is, which is an offshore platform for power projection. And that's why we were taken in 1898 and 1899, and that's why they've returned at this point in time. So, yes, I agree with you. Let's get progressive and liberal forces to move, offer a new vision, but at the same time, we should be very wary about the kind of concessions that are being given to the United States at this point in time. And we really need to have an independent foreign policy. Unfortunately, the Marcoses really are not the people to provide that. The only thing that the Marcoses are interested in is the protection of their property, okay, abroad and here. And in fact, you may disagree with this, Richard, but the reason that those concessions have been made to the United States was because Marcos always feared that the United States could freeze his assets in all the different places in the world where they have that $10 billion
The
invested in.
U.S. Treasury has a lot of power. It arms can reach all sorts of
Very,
banks. Yeah, very powerful. Yeah.
very, and that's really what our foreign policy now amounts to. It doesn't independence. It's not about. It's about the protection of the Marcos treasury abroad.
Well, then I appreciate you smuggling in the foreign policy part, which I but you could see in my face like we can have a completely different podcast on that because no, I agree with you in principle. This is not about choosing one master over the other. Although I would say historically, I'm more worried. Like I think U.S. is more like the declining Spain, and China is more like the U.S. at the turn of the 20th century. But we can go back to the Aguinaldo moment, in a separate podcast. Um, and I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, it's there's no easy answers to this, right? I mean, how can we find the proper kind of a equilibrium or Goldilocks point whereby the Philippines can leverage alliances and partnership, but not sell out to one superpower to defend itself against another bully and all of that. I want to end on this note because I thanks for bringing that out because we'll have to have a separate discussion really on that because I keep on saying you mentioning Richard is a great guy but we have some disagreements, so we're gonna settle that, don't worry about it, Walden. But
Yeah.
I want to ask, what is your blueprint for the opposition? Because when I and Ronald and other friends come together, we always say, and Leloy and other common friends, we always say something special happened last year, right? Look at how much excitement you and your campaign generated with Kaliodi. Look at how much excitement Lenny's campaign also generated. The millions that came out among others. I mean, we can debate about the faults of the liberals and all, but we cannot debate about the yearning for a more progressive democratic politics and future for the Philippines. So we saw there's a constituency for that, literally
Yes.
millions coming out. Don't you think that gives you a little bit of window into what can happen? Because the last time we had a conversation was about Thailand, right? And the sad thing in Thailand is there is a military junta, right? There is a monarchy, absolute monarchy that eventually block Pita, and the progressives from coming in. Thankfully, we don't have that. So if we just get our act together, we can do what Pita could not do. So Pita got the election and mobilization right, but the rest was beyond his control because Thailand is not really a democracy. The Philippines is a broken democracy, but it's still a democracy in the sense that there's no absolute monarch, crazy military, right? So our excuses are fewer than Pita and Thailand. So that's why I really like our podcast earlier this year when we discussed the Thai elections. So what is your blueprint, Walden, for what should the opposition do to make sure is this the Emmanuel Ram Emmanuel thing that never let a kind of a crisis go to waste, right? How can the opposition make sure that this I keep on quoting my chief of staff of U.S. presidents, right, from Prevost to Ram Emanuel. No, how does the opposition make sure this implosion of the Uniteam doesn't go down as just another family feud for us to be stuck with another dynasty for the foreseeable future? Because one of the things I hated hearing is, so ganito yan, BBM, then Sara, then, I don't know, Marcos the Third, and then, Baste. Like, that's the most cynical and, like, hopeless way of looking at Philippine politics. Because my suspicion is we're gonna have a president in 2028 which is not named Marcos or Duterte or anything like that. I'm almost 100% sure about that. I'm not gonna give names, but I'm very confident. And my point is there's a good chance for the progressive opposition to come in. What is the last point there? Wag mo na i-smuggle yung EDCA and all. Mahabang usapan yan. We can have a back and forth on
Sure.
that. Let's have a
Sure.
separate podcast na lang on that, Walden. But let's talk about politics, Philippines, progressive future amid the implosion of unity.
Well, let me say that the elements of a program for the country are there and have been there for some time.
Right.
Whether it's in agriculture, the way that our agriculture needs to be resurrected,
Yeah.
whether on the question of manufacturing and the way that we must again, be smart industrially, and on the way that there has to be changes with respect to, the way that the economy is run. Like we cannot just leave it up to neoliberal technocrats who've screwed up the economy for the last, 40 years. Nandun, I mean, whether it's on climate, the key elements of the program are really there. And we really need, one, to popularize those, this progressive program. And secondly, we really need to construct these alliances, that will be hard to construct,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, I think it's very, very necessary, which means that the different groups now on the opposition really need to not see it as a zero sum game. That they have to make certain concessions in order to be able to forge a really great, effective coalition. And then finally, with respect to the left part of that, I think that enough of the rhetoric, enough of the quarrels within the left,
Yeah.
enough with models of the 20th century. Let's move on to really conceptualizing and fighting for a real social democracy or democratic socialist future. I think that's where it is, and I sometimes I waver on this because my generation, Richard, um, was caught up in the revolution of the 1970s and
Yeah.
1980s. If you can remember that, when that was
I
that
wasn't
was
born then.
yeah,
I
right.
didn't say
But it was the sense that
it.
there was going to be what they called
Yeah.
a national democratic future.
Right.
But after 1986, that went down the drain. And cyclically to mga generations, maybe what will really make the difference is the generation after Gen Z.
Yeah.
You know, that the generation that is now
Yeah.
in their very young stages.
Yeah.
That will
I
again.
think nine and below. Yeah, nine and below or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
like my
yeah.
nephew and
Kasi,
niece. Yeah.
that's I have a feeling that that might be the generation that will really take up again the banner
Right.
of real change in the country. So, I go back and forth on this, but nevertheless, I think it's very important that we um, look at the here and now and see what are the possibilities, not for a shallow unity of the opposition, but for a unit, but for a unity that's forged on principles. And I know people sometimes say people like me, people
Mm.
like you are just too idealistic. No, I really doubt
Right.
when an idea, whose time has come,
Right.
uh, is there,
No one can
nothing can
stop it.
stop it.
Yeah, nothing can stop it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Walden, for that. I think this just tells us that we need another podcast soon. I think I want to have another discussion with you also on industrial policy. In fact, one of the best episodes in the year that we did was episode I did with Lisandro Claudio on the history of the Philippines industrial policy strategy, why it failed from essentially Commonwealth period all the way to post Marcos era, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I would
yeah.
yes. So I
He's,
would
he's,
love.
he's the expert on that. Leloy
Yes,
Cloud,
exactly.
he's
The
studied
bureaucratic
that.
politics. So he has
Yeah.
a new book actually on that. So that was a fantastic discussion because I want to talk to you too because I also had a series of podcasts with Sunny Africa also about this issue of an industrial policy for the 21st century. But of course, you are the guru of this. You're one of the persons who first focused really on the role of technocrats and how they're also partly responsible for the morass and mess that we find ourselves developmentally today. Fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia, highest unemployment, underemployment, highest poverty rate. There's something fundamentally wrong here. So hopefully,
Yeah,
Walden, we can have you
and
soon to discuss that. Yeah.
sure, I would just like to also put a plug for Tessa Encarnacion's
Yes.
Marcos's Technocrats. That I
Yes.
think is a very great study of how these people were able to capture the the economic policy making and are still holding it because of the ideology. So anyway, yeah,
Yes.
right,
Thank
Richard.
you for giving the plug-in for the next episode, essentially. So, because I want to also talk about what should we do for the 21st century with AI and artificial intelligence and 3D printing and 5G, 6G network. And I mean, can we do the industrial policy like we did before or something new should be done? So there's so much to discuss, Walden, on that. And then don't worry, we'll go back to our pet peeve on EDCA and all. We can have a fight over that because that's
Oh
what we
yeah,
are. We're pluralistic Democrats. We can agree to disagree, and that's what I want people to understand. We can agree to disagree even as friends, and all, and there's nothing wrong about that. It's just part of the debate, and the problem because with people is they misconstrue disagreement as an assault on someone's dignity or something like that. Anyway, thank you so much, Walden. Dr.
I'm
Walden
pretty
Bello.
sure you'll never sue me for cyber libel.
Yeah. We're safe from that. I think it's you really had to bring it back there. All right. Anyway, hopefully we can have more of this discussion. Walden Bello, mabuhay po kayo. Stay strong and stay passionate as you are. Many people are very much inspired by what you're doing. We even have DDS supporters, Marcos supporters, Lenny support, all of them watching us and all of them appreciating what you're doing, Walden. Mabuhay ka and talk to you soon, Dr. Bello.
Okay, thanks a lot, Richard. I really appreciate your being on your program.
As always, talk to you soon. God bless.
Okay,
Thanks, Walden. I'll send you link once this are out. God bless.
okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Alright guys, salamat. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat sa lahat ng mga nanonood sa atin. As I said, ito talaga nag-arrange tayo. We'll try to have more of this discussion also in the future, not only with Dr. Bello, one of the leading sociologists in the world, but also we'll have it with KRNR, RRM, RRL, all of mga kasama natin na we talk to usually. Alright, on that note, thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon.